Why don't you start? Why don't you do a little welcome, Chris, and then I'll kick it over to me, and then we can you can edit this in post production.
We are really excited to have everybody. This is our first rollout. I'm doing SuptCHAT as a live conversation with superintendent leaders from across the United States doing incredible things. But then we're also have the ability to keep the same Twitter chat option. Anybody engaging in our Twitter chat, we see your comments, we see it, and we can engage within those conversations. But it's fully live. And then I'm Chris Nesmith, superintendent of the Elma School District. With me is
Hi there. I'm Peter Finch, superintendent of the West Valley School District in Yakima, Washington. Chris and I work together here in West Valley, and now we're colleagues as superintendents, so that's pretty cool.
Then our guest today is going to be Mike Lubelfeld and Nick Polyak. So Mike and Nick, do you want to kind of give a quick introduction about what you're working on?
Yeah, sure. Just tell us about yourself and everyone else who's commenting. Share your name, position, location, and what's something fun that you did this summer.
Okay, well, I am Mike Lubelfeld, Superintendent of Schools, North Shore School District 112 in Highland Park and Highwood, Illinois, Northeast Illinois, about 25 miles north of Chicago, 25 miles south of the Wisconsin border on the beautiful shores of Lake Michigan. This is a nice time to be in Chicagoland in the metro area. I'm starting my 15th consecutive year as a superintendent, 7th consecutive here in the North Shore, which is bizarre, wild, and really awesome. So shout out and thank you to the school board and to the 112 community. We are working on a lot of cool things that we'll talk about today. One fun thing I did this summer is my son is a high school student. He's into high jump, and he and I went to Minneapolis, and we went to a high jump clinic, and we spent the weekend where he did some clinics with some other students from around the country. And then he and I got to spend some cool father-son time. So that was really fun. And I can't believe that summer is just about over. I don't want to say it yet, but we're getting there.
We are there, right?
We're getting there.
And Nick?
All right, Nick, how about you?
Thanks, guys. Nick Polyak, I'm the superintendent for Leyden Community High School District 212. I'm also in Illinois, while Mike is on the beautiful shores of Lake Michigan. I'm situated on the beautiful runways of O'Hare International Airport. It's just as beautiful, though, don't worry. I've been a superintendent for 16 years now, my first 4 in Central Illinois and the last 12 up here at Leyden. Fun things this summer, we went with one of my high school friends and his families. We rented a house in the Smoky Mountains, just outside of Gatlinburg and Sevierville. It was the scariest drive I've ever done to get to the top of this mountain where the house was. But we had a great time. And then just a week or so ago, my wife and I got to go to Cancun to celebrate our 24th wedding anniversary. So that was fun also.
Sweet.
24, that sounds incredible.
That's awesome. All right, Chris Nesmith, why don't you introduce yourself as well? Tell us something fun you've done this summer.
Oh, well, I my wife and I and my youngest daughter went to Greece. So we did 2 weeks in Santorini, a couple of days in Athens. My oldest daughter is actually a foreign exchange student in Japan. So it was the first time traveling without my oldest daughter around. And then Peter?
Yeah, so Peter Finch, superintendent, West Valley of Yakima. Yakima's in central Washington State. It's a real agricultural area. I was raised here in the valley. Background, I've got 5 years as a teacher, 8 years as a high school principal, then 20 years here in West Valley as assistant superintendent, and then starting my 4th year as superintendent here in West Valley. So that's 24 years here in West Valley. Was it 32 years as a school administrator and my 37th year as an educator. And something fun this summer, had the family reunion over in Montana in the Flathead Lake area in the Mission Valley. It's really beautiful over there. That was where my grandmother was raised during the Great Depression. There were 12 siblings, 12 kids in her family. So she had 11 siblings. It was all during the Great Depression. They were dirt poor. And they had this pipeline to Eastern Washington University in Cheney. And they had an aunt that worked there. And so all the kids went to Eastern. And they wound up, education was the answer for that family. And that's my family, right? So education, they had, she had brothers that got their doctoral degree. And it was just, it's just an amazing story of how education really turned that family around. So well, that's part of my legacy is I'm part of that family. It's great.
So that kind of brings us to our first question, Peter.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tonight's topic is on transformational leadership, exactly why we have Mike and Nick joining us. They've been the leaders of ASAs. Mike, I love you call it TLC, Transformational Leadership. So as you've been chasing waterfalls, but or not chasing waterfalls. But what does transformational leadership mean to you?
So transformational leadership, to me, it's about inspiring and motivating others. The adults we support, who support the adults, who support the students, motivating students as well to achieve their fullest potential and really to go beyond even their own expectations. It involves creating a vision for the future that resonates with people, that inspire a shared vision concept, fostering an environment of trust and respect and empowerment, and really leading by example and being humble. You're a change agent and you're helping, you're facilitating, you're pushing, but it's not about you. It's not about the leader. It's a humble way to inspire others around you and help cause change and growth.
Change and growth. I love that. And I love the humility behind that, where it's just like, how can we do this together? So Nick, what about you? What does transformational leadership mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, most things that Mike and I say, the other one could say. We've pretty much merged into one person after so many years together. But when I think about this, I think of I tell our staff sometimes on my business card it should say Horizon Watcher. Like, my job is to look out further. When everybody's stuck in the day to day and you're just trying to get through, somebody needs to be looking out further to say, here's where we need to go. I think another way to say it is you got to go out and look around the corner, maybe, and see what people can't see yet to figure out where you need to go. Because, it's a little cliche, but we often talk about the fact that we're preparing kids to go out into a world that is nothing like the world that all of us grew up in or went into. And so transformational leadership is about being relevant and creating the conditions that kids need.
You say something great, because just as a follow-up point that I thought is we're not teaching. We listed out all the years we've had in education. Peter, what did you say? 37 years. And I don't think our teachers are teaching in the world in which we entered teaching. So
Definitely.
we for years we talk about our kids are not going to work in worlds in which like work in jobs that exist anymore. But even teaching is not the same job that it used to be anymore. And how are we thinking about our teachers? And I think that's why I like the book, The UnLearning Leader and the Unlearning, it's just such an incredible point. So
I think transformational leadership, we really wanted to have Nick and Mike on for this first podcast because, they have such a great legacy of SuptCHAT. It's been since 2014 is when they started SuptCHAT. And they work together as co-leaders for the Transformational Leadership Consortium with AASA. And I was just interested in this idea of transformational leadership. It seems like kind of that difference between management and leadership. Management is kind of keeping the status quo, but leadership is making improvements, making changes. And transformational leadership, I would think, isn't that where you're leading people to really I guess, how do you say it without saying transform? Like transform the system that you have, changing the system, maybe thinking, outside the box or throw away the box, and like you said, unlearn what we've done in the past, because if we're going to keep getting the same results if we just keep doing the same thing. Like, how can we transform our systems to be more student-centered, more future-focused, and really prepare students for their future, not our past, like Chris just said. I mean, tell us some more about just that work you've had with the Transformational Leadership Consortium, and also, Nick, you've got some plans coming up in the future for TLC.
Peter hits actually our question too, like almost perfectly, which is if you can share, as you're talking about this, sharing an example of change that you've led in your district or school, and kind of like how, as you're leading this transformational leadership, what are some examples and how you had to work your way through it?
Yeah, Mike, I'll kick off if you don't mind. In the vein of transformational leadership, the Transformational Leadership Consortium at AASA didn't used to be the TLC. It was the Digital Consortium when it started 10 years ago. And we were trying to help school districts make that jump to one-to-one. And what does teaching and learning look like with devices now in the mix? And then as time went by, that wasn't the relevant thing anymore. We really kind of morphed into this transformational leadership to look more at structures and programs and what can you do systemically to better meet kids' needs. So I think the TLC itself, it's called transformational leadership, but it's transformed in its own way, which is kind of fun.
Cool.
Mike, do you want to talk about something in your district, and then I can go back to that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So when I became superintendent in North Shore School District 112 in 2018, the school district had gone through a very difficult time. They had failed a large bond referendum 2 years prior. They lost the superintendent, went to another state. Board members turned over. Members of the central office left. The principal team was really in a state of flux, and there were some interim superintendents who helped the new school board really figure out where they should go. And so I came on board, and it was all about transforming a lot of things. One of them was the narrative of a successful district that failed, that was a failed place. And immediately we, school board, teachers, administration, students, families, we created a different vision. And part of this was creating a clear vision. And the vision was that we're successful, we're leaders, and we're going to come out of this and move forward. We're not in a state that is unrepairable. And part of it was involving people in the process. So initially there was a lot of construction work that needed to be done. And briefly, always getting a team of stakeholders together and a team of community partners with divergent viewpoints. And that included staff members with divergent viewpoints. And there was always providing some support and resources, right? As a superintendent, you're an orchestra director, a facilitator. So having an architect on board, on hand to talk through some design elements, they're the expert. Having financial planners and construction managers there to really answer hard questions. Ultimately, we started to recognize and celebrate progress, and it was telling our story. For if we don't tell it, someone else will, a la Joe Sanfilippo and others. And then it really started to foster the culture of collaboration. And we had a successful plan for long range facilities in November of 2018. So throughout the entirety of the process, transparency and honesty, very direct communication, almost too much, but that's okay. Leadership by example, and by leadership, teachers union, administrators, school board, central office, cabinet, parents, teams, and committees, and elevating them, and the encouragement of continuous improvement. This is simply one stop on our, train tracks of life, or train tracks of leadership. We're on a journey of continuous improvement. And that is an example of the framework that got us started in a 4 or 5 month period that, knock on wood, is still going 7 years strong, with changing the narrative, changing the feeling of failure, changing the fact that we were stuck and had a different mindset. And now that mindset is once again, it's a destination school organization where people want to come and raise their children and come and work.
You touched on a small piece that I love on that though, which is like really getting your community bought behind that common vision, and then how you maintain that transparency and achieving that common vision. And I just think that's powerful. Like everybody can see where they want to go, and you kind of orchestrate that, but everybody in their mind's eye knows where you're headed together. And I just think
don't you think it's just that sustainability where when people come together and they see the good things that are happening when you can collaborate, you get energy from that and they want to continue that. And so it's the idea of success breeds success.
Yeah. Yes.
So Nick, how about you? What's going on in Leyden?
Yeah, one of the things I'm super proud of is we have a program called CoLab, which is interdisciplinary, project-based, problem-based version of freshman year for students. And the way it began was, Mike mentioned humility earlier. Like I always tell people, like, I've never had a good idea in my life, but I'll create the conditions for people to incubate ideas and work. So we created a group of teachers. We freed them up from some meeting time, and they were volunteers, and we called them the Innovation Incubator. And we just said, dream big. What can you come up with? What should we be doing that we're not? And through their work over the course of a year, they created what became CoLab. 120 kids per high school, a completely different freshman year, where there's no bells. They don't go and do English for 45 minutes, ring a bell, and then go do science for 45 minutes and ring a bell. It's a block of time, and it's all interdisciplinary, and it's in the community, and it's confidence, and it's teamwork, and it's public speaking, and it just creates a whole different kid that I think is more relevant to the world today. But it's not something that I did. It's something we freed our teachers up to create, and now they're fully invested.
You don't know this. I think it was either Washington, D.C. or it was in Nashville, but I was in a ASA conference presentation on CoLab, and it just blew my mind on the work that you were doing.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, and I think my second in command, Mark, just came back and we were just blown away. We're like, okay, how do we start reinforcing? So this year we just started working on our 9th grade onboarding. How can we redo that experience for them? How can we restructure? We're nowhere near where you are, but just sharing that vision and allowing us to absorb it. I think we just walked away fully inspired.
Come
Yeah, I
back
think
to
it's
visit.
cool. I was gonna say, I think it's cool how, like you said, you don't have to be the person that has all the ideas, but being in the position that you are as superintendent, you're able to tell people, hey, we don't have to always do things the way we've always done them. And you have permission to change the rules. Let's change the rules. You don't have to ring the bells. Kids are going to be able to continue learning if there's no bells ringing, and don't have to go to the next period. You can do integrated learning and it can happen and it can be successful.
And Peter, you have a knack for this. You nail the next questions as they pop up. So, it kind of brings us to that, that unlearning. So what is that leadership belief or practice that you've had to unlearn in your career? And I think just like that starting point of like, as leaders, we always want to be in charge. But I mean, Nick, you just hit that on the head. We don't have to be. We can build the capacity. So maybe kind of springboarding that to some other unlearning you've done.
And we asked the unlearning question because if people don't know and they're watching, we got authors here that are guests.
Oh, here it is.
Unlearning. Feel free to plug away.
Oh, he will. Don't worry. Mike's never shy.
Tell us about unlearning. What's that all about?
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, okay. Oh, really? If you insist. So,
twist my arm.
You like that? The Unlearning Leader, leading for tomorrow's schools, today, available anywhere books are sold. Nick and I were fortunate enough to write that and publish it in 2017. We really talk about unlearning outdated or ineffective leadership practices. And I can tell you personally, a practice that I have emphasized unlearning in my career really is top-down decision making. I'm a far different superintendent in year 15 than I was in year 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I've learned it by taking leadership lessons from former presidents, business executives, people in the field, researchers, Michael Fullen. Ronald Reagan is credited as, I think, as Steve Jobs is saying, hire great people, get out of their way. So, oh, excuse me. Okay, so thank you, Alexa. Sorry about that. So, it isn't abdicating your responsibility as a leader to support and coach and guide and foster and cultivate. It is, though, changing that from directing and commanding and overbearing. So really unlearning that leadership is a top-down or command or your referent position determines the level of impact or influence, and changing that to and transforming for lack of a better word today, to a more inclusive and collaborative approach where as a leader you're a guide on the side. Yes, you have different responsibilities, and yes, as a superintendent or CEO you're the N of one, so there are different expectations. You work with the board, so on and so forth. However, I have unlearned that I'm as important as my title, and I've relearned that my ability to cultivate group and inclusivity and culture is far more impactful for children and for the adults that service them.
And Mike, it sounds like that role of the superintendent as a catalyst of bringing people together and bringing people to the table. Sometimes people feel like their voice is not heard, that they don't feel like they have a place at the table. As a superintendent, you can do that outreach, bring people to the table, and then when they're collaborating, then great things can happen from there.
So, Peter, this is not shameless self-promotion, but I'll add a little tip of the hat to PJ Capozzi, 2023 Illinois Superintendent of the Year. Nick and I wrote a book, literally, Peter, that said student voice from invisible to invaluable. And in all sincerity, the leadership framework that we developed is known by the acronym ASKEM, meaning ASK''EM. Ask the students for their input, support them, know the students, build those relationships, empower them, and then monitor the work that you're doing together. And through the ASKEM leadership frame, you can amplify voices that are sometimes invisible in an organization, and we thought that you should not. So thank you for your expert segueing.
And also, hey, you know what? Just to cement our learning, can you take us through the acronym again?
Yeah. Ask them. ASK''EM. Ask is ask the students for their input. S is support the students, meaning take that input and then support whatever it is you're going to do with that input. K is get to know and build those relationships. That's the foundation of all effective pedagogy and education. So ASK, ask, support, and know. And then E is empower them, empower the learners, empower the students. It's their schools, empower the staff that support them. And M is monitor. So that leadership frame, again, you don't have to command it and direct it as the leader. You do, though, have to monitor the impact, monitor the effect, monitor the progress. So if you want to bring student voice from invisible to invaluable, all you got to do is just ask them. And that's really where that came from.
We were talking about admin retreats, and I think it's great that you bring up PJ, because my wife's an administrator in the Aberdeen School District just down the road from me, and then he was their admin retreat speaker last year. So she just came home just on fire a year ago. Like, this is how we're going to be getting kids engaged, and this is how we're going to have. So I think just the shout out to PJ Kaposi is just a great one, and just know that I mean, as an educational leadership, my wife was just like totally inspired after one of his leading her admin retreat out here in Washington State.
Cool. Hey Nick, how about yourself? What did you have to unlearn as a superintendent?
Well, continuing the student voice piece from Mike, tomorrow we have a board meeting and we're going to swear in our next student board member. So we have a 7-person adult board, like every other school district in Illinois, but we actually have 9 board members. We have 2 students on our board at all times. And so, you know, that's like, I think, an example of what Mike's talking about, of turning over some of the leadership, shared leadership with the kids, because it's their schools. But I often talk about elasticity in an organization like a rubber band. You know, that we're born to stretch, like we have to, that's our function. And if you ever open up a junk drawer in your office or at home and you find a rubber band that's been in the back of the drawer for 2 years and you try to pick it up, it's brittle and it's dysfunctional, right? It's not going to work. Same is true of our school districts. If we don't stretch ourselves, we're going to become wildly outdated and useless. But the elasticity has another side. The organization can only sustain so much stretch. So there may be things that I want to transform or things I want to do, but if I pull too hard, too fast, I'll snap it. So finding that sweet spot where you're constantly stretching without going too little or too much.
That's sweet, a sweet analogy. That's great.
So now we're talking about that stretching, right? So what strategies are you using to inspire and motivate your staff to embrace this change as you're stretching them, Nick?
First of all is giving permission. We talked about it earlier, of saying it's okay, go forth and conquer, celebrate the risk taking, you know, encourage it, support them, whether it's in time or financial resources, and say, you know, I'm going to give you everything you need to be successful. And sometimes that comes with pushback, right? So when you give people time, some of the colleagues don't like that, because they shouldn't get time. I didn't get time. They shouldn't get money. I didn't get money. And so playing defense to create the time and resources, I think, is a kind of an art form to create the conditions where these things can happen.
I think that's inspired. I mean, because when you're trying, everybody wants to know what's fair. And I think really being anchored in is what's most fair is us being what's best for our kids with the resources we have. And sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. But at the end of the day, we're constantly trying to be better.
Well, yeah. You know, everybody wants change. Nobody wants to change, right? Whenever Mike and I talk, I always talk about this comic strip I love. It's a little cafe, and there's a butterfly and a caterpillar sitting on either sides of a table. And the caterpillar looks at the butterfly and says, "You've changed." And the next panel, the butterfly says, "We're supposed to." Like, our schools are supposed to change to meet the changing needs of our kids, but we struggle with it so much.
Yeah. So, Mike, how about yourself? What strategies do you use to inspire and motivate your staff to embrace change?
So again, and I'll just keep with some of this. So in 2021, Nick, PJ Kaposi, and I wrote the Unfinished School Leadership Framework for Growth and Development. And in all sincerity, your segues are incredible. The strategies involve a leadership framework that is built upon the following leadership activities. Leadership activity built on developing equity and empathy. So you understand where people are coming from, and you start to lead with the heart. You build those relationships and get to know, and you have an equitable approach, meeting the needs of the people that you're serving versus determining what you think their needs are. So the inspiring and motivating your staff is building relationships with them and listening to them and finding out where are they in terms of this change model. We then move on to development and adapt. So the adapt concept is we're looking to push from technical to transformative change. Just in and of itself, we're looking to do something that's meaningful and sustainable despite the people who are there. And you want to develop yourself and others so you can constantly get better and keep growing. Finally, you communicate and you also acknowledge the problems with change. The reason no one wants to change is because change means loss. Change means that you're doing something different and you're violating or breaking a tradition that was sacred and held sacrosanct. So understanding what those limitations are, inspire that shared vision, follow the sense of urgency, and lead together. Not consensus, and not democracy. Lead together, inspiring that shared vision and following the framework like we laid out or like others have laid out as well.
I agree. I think it's great. And also I think it's how you frame it. We talk about change and people get apprehensive, but we talk about improvement. I think people in general, everyone wants to improve. And how about we talk about learning? Learning has changed. When you've learned something, you're different than you were previously. You've made a change. And so I always talk about school systems should be nested organizations. As superintendent, we should create a safe environment for administrators so they're willing to take risk and have change. Administrators should have their staff have a safe environment so they can work on improvements. And then teachers should have a safe environment in the classroom so that students can take risk and be willing to, have some stumbles along the way, because we're not going to get better and grow unless we learn from mistakes. So it's just like this whole system needs to be supportive and safe environments so people can maximize their potential.
And you hint on it, like this, creating this environment of like this very safe environment. I mean, because we want risk taking to be rewarded, and risk taking comes with failure. So just knowing that, like, hey, we're going to go this road together, but we're going to support you in anything that goes wrong. We're in it together. Like, we're going to get through it together. We're going to fix it together, but we're in it together. We're not going to abandon it. We're just going to fix it. We're going to adjust, pivot. We're going to
Chris and I have done a lot with mastery-based learning. And so like our grading systems, if you're grading every assignment and dinging kids on every assignment, there's no incentive to try to go out and fail in something because you're getting dinged on the assignment. So why not have more summative, looking at and portfolio-based, performance-based, so that you can show you meet the standards eventually, but you're not getting dinged on your report card. But
so
that's another topic. So we got to keep rolling.
You're going to give advice to our leaders, right?
Final question.
What advice would you give to aspiring leaders who want to become a transformational leader in their school?
Find a mentor, seek a mentor out, find a coach, join your professional association at whatever level you're in, whatever, if you're a teacher, your subject area department, if you're an administrator, your principal association, so on and so forth, and learn and grow. Find your why, your purpose, be humble, and remember that the impact is needed to continue to sustain our way of life. So the advice is do it.
I would just add, I think to be a transformational leader, you need to be okay living in ambiguity.
Yeah.
Right? If you're going to do things that are going to change systems and change practices, it's hard to know what it's going to be like on the other end, right? You're kind of flying blind. When we created CoLab, I was sweating the whole year to see what the test scores were for those kids. And when they were as good or better than their peers that went through traditional classrooms, I was like, phew. But like, I've been here 12 years now, right? So I've got a great trust built up with an amazing board of education. And that allows us to do some things that are a little more daring than maybe I could have done in my first year. So I think living in ambiguity is a really big thing for me.
I think what I would marry with that is this level of forgiveness, right? Because as you're okay with things not being there, I mean, sometimes as leaders, we get so hard on ourselves.
Yes.
And an ability, what I like about having a strong mentor to lead you through, that mentor is going to tell you things are okay, and you're working your way through ambiguity. It just kind of gives you that ability to like, just forgive yourself, be gracious, just be happy with where you're going, and just understand that it go wrong, but we're always working to become better.
Yep.
All right, well, we gotta wrap it up, but really appreciate Nick and Mike helping us launch our first podcast here. They started SuptCHAT in 2014 online, so here we are in 2024. It's really awesome. Mike, you talked about having a mentor and building your network. Well, a great opportunity for that is AASA Leadership Network. There's all the great cohorts, consortiums. Nick is leader of the Transformational Leadership Consortium, so TLC. Got, I'm sure, a great program set up for the 24-25. Chris Nesmith is co-leader for Redefining Ready. They got program there, and I co-lead the early learning cohort. So check out the AASA website, and you can join any of those leadership network cohorts and consortium and build your network. So thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. Chris, you want last word?
No, actually, I think we're happy that people have stuck it out with us on our first live podcast. It is live. There's no post-production editing. So, and with that,